Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm as always your host, Brody Robertson, and today people have asked me to do NixOS stuff for a very long time. I don't even know when the first time I got a NixOS suggestion was. Probably, I don't even want to think about it. I actually don't want to think about it. It's been that long. So, today we have someone who knows quite a bit about NixOS. How about you introduce yourself and, we'll go from there.
Hello, I am Tristan Ross, also known as the Computer Guy, and I am actually the 2411 release manager. I helped organize 2505, which will be releasing next month.
Mhm.
I am also the one of the standard environment maintainers, and I maintain LLVM, SE Linux, and a few other components in Nix packages. So I'm pretty well versed in what's going on there.
Mhm. So, as I was saying before we started recording, like I know a bit of like surface level stuff about Nix, right? If you're in the Linux world, it's pretty hard to not run into somebody who's gonna shill Nix to you. You know, people talk about, hey, Arch users like to tell you they use Arch. I've noticed quite a similarity with the with NixOS people. Anytime there is any question about dependency management or packaging or anything that could potentially be fixed by the way that Nix handles things, I'm gonna get at least one comment from someone in the world of Nix.
Yeah, NixOS is basically like the new, by the way, I use Arch kind of
Mm-mm.
thing. I used to actually run Arch kind of a little bit before I switched over to NixOS. Was on Void in between, but it's kind of gone that way where for a long time Arch Linux was kind of like the, hey, I run a specialized Linux system. But
Mhm.
now it is very much becoming NixOS with the popularity it's been gaining over the past 5 years. That's
Mhm.
been really exploding.
Mhm. Your mic just started becoming like really staticky for a second there. Could you just say something again?
Okay.
Okay, it's gone. That's
I think it's just one of those weird issues that Pulse Pipewire has, or
okay.
something like that.
Sure. Okay, if it happens again, hopefully it doesn't happen again. Anyway, yeah. I definitely have heard a lot more about Nix as things have been going on, especially as things like flat packs, maybe not snaps as much, but definitely flat packs have become a lot more popular as a way to deal with dependency management on these different systems. Usually you're going to have someone come along like, oh, we don't need something like that. Hey, we could use this instead. But I guess clearly there's a reason why people always come along suggesting Nix, right? Like it's not just people saying it because they just kind of feel like it. So I think the best place to start is, so there are two main things. There is NixOS, the distribution itself, and there is Nix, the package manager. I guess we should probably start with the package manager itself.
Yeah, so I actually want to start with the language because
Okay, sure.
the language is kind of what builds the basis of the package manager.
Mm,
So the Nix language, it's got, from what I've heard, similarities to Haskell. It
mm.
is a functional programming language, and you can kind of imagine it as a JSON with functions that spits out bash scripts. That's essentially what it
Right.
does. You have very primitive things like attribute sets, lists, just your generic strings, and a little bit funky ones like paths and string context is numbers are another like regular thing. And then you have this funky type called a derivation.
Mhm.
And derivation is really like a recipe. You
Mhm.
provide your derivation with an attribute set, and you provide it with things like the system uh, double. You provide it with a name and a builder.
Mhm.
And with those three components, it's able to call the builder and then spit out to some sort of output that is determined by hashing the attribute set.
Mhm.
And there's just some math in there that just does a funky hash, and it gives you this long character string where it's like Nix slash store slash whatever garbage with the
Mhm.
name attached.
Right.
And so essentially what you get is kind of like if you were to look at like a database and kind of like see everything has an ID,
Mhm.
it's kind of like that.
Mhm.
But it's on your file system. And so this is kind of getting to where now we're talking about Nix
Mhm.
instead of just the Nix language.
Mhm.
And you can build up these concepts of just some arbitrary location that you're writing out to. And you can build up a packaging system.
Mhm.
And by referencing one derivation into another derivation, you suddenly have dependencies. And if you track things correctly enough, you can build up a dependency tree. And then with that, if you just specify, I want this derivation that out of all the other derivations,
Mhm.
it's going to pull just that derivation and what other derivations that derivation needs.
Right.
So you get the concept of being able to pull its dependencies from referencing one package. Kind of like how when you do an npm install, it's going to pull all of its dependencies. But instead of going into some random directly like node modules,
Mhm.
it's going to tell your Nix tool.
Mhm.
But with how Nix works, you don't need to be roots,
Mhm.
unlike other package managers like apt or pacman, because it's in a Nix store. So now you suddenly have a way of installing packages without really installing them on the system.
Mhm.
And through that, we're able to have a package repo.
Right. So the Nix store, you use that term a couple of times. The Nix store is basically the location where the packages are stored, if that's correct, or the installed applications are stored.
Yeah, it's not really considered installing.
Mm.
There's a few different phases Nix goes through. You have evaluation,
Mm.
then you have instantation. You go from there, and then you have either building or fetching.
Okay.
And the building or fetching is what it does to take what's called an instantiated derivation
Mhm.
and putting it into the store.
Mhm.
And the way it does that is it'll check to see if your substitutors or one of your builders are available.
Mhm.
And if it's already built and available, it's just going to pull it from whatever build system that you have remotely available or whatever uh, other like caches that you have available as a substitutor.
Mhm.
And it just fetches it, puts it in the next door, and there you have it.
Mhm. So I always hear about Nix the handling dependencies or and handling like installed versions in a better way than you would have in a more traditional packaging system. So through this system where you have these unique ID for your packages and it links to the other packages that uh, that package depends on, you can then have multiple versions of that on your system and it links to the different IDs for those different versions of the package. If that makes sense. If I'm saying this
Yeah,
correctly. I don't know
yeah,
the Nix
because
terminology, but if that.
yeah, so that's kind of coming from instantiation.
Mhm.
So evaluation is going to eval all of your uh, Nix code,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
instantiation, what it does is it tells the Nix daemon, "Hey, I have this attribute set that's being pushed to this derivation. Actually, make it a derivation."
Mhm.
So then it takes all that metadata associated, and then it assigns that hash.
Mhm.
And through this, since every hash is arbitrary for is how that package is specifically written, if you change certain things, you can then get different versions of a package.
Mhm.
So kind of you can even with like different packages that has different like build features. Like, hey, I want to build some browser without FTP support, or hey, I want to build something using GCC instead of Clang. You just specify that in, and because it changes that attribute set, it's going to change that hash, and then you suddenly have two different versions of the same exact package. They
Mhm.
could even be the same version of that package, but because they evaluate it differently, they have a different hash, which means they're going to be specified differently and not included together.
Mhm. So does this system work like all the way down, right? Like obviously it makes sense for, like your Firefoxes, things like that, but does this work at the level of something like glibc? Does it work at things like the Linux kernel level? Is there a point it breaks, or does this work all the way down the stack?
As long as you have some sort of arbitrary way of evaluating and being able to put a file somewhere,
Mhm,
you can pretty much put anything in there.
mhm,
Like even some of the concepts people have thought of is like doing machine learning models
mhm.
and splitting them apart and then putting them in a Nix stores, because then you're able to have these large language models inside the Nix store and only pull the components you want.
Okay. I was not aware of that at all. Okay.
Yeah, this was actually a concept that was kind of thought of
Mhm,
during the recent conference in Pasadena called Planet Nix,
mhm.
ran by Flocks, where the idea is to split up these large language models because they're usually gigabytes in size, and you don't need everything. So if you have some sort of way of being able to build
Uh
it in,
Terabytes, I think you meant. Gigabytes is not that much.
yes, sorry, I meant I haven't worked much with these models, but they are file sizes that get difficult to download just because they're so large
Right, right, right,
and there's so
right.
many different components to them.
Sorry, I was just being pedantic. I just go on.
I have California internet, and it's also great.
I don't. Yeah. What? Who? I don't know whose side it was then. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, so basically any sort of file works. There's a couple kind of files you don't really want to put in there, like device files or like sockets, but that makes sense because those aren't going to distribute easily. But any regular file, symlinks, those work. All your generic things works.
Mhm,
So we're able to put libcs, we can put compilers, we can put tarballs, we can do anything inside of a derivation,
mhm,
basically.
mhm. Right. Okay. So the Nix package manager itself. This is not something that has to be used on NixOS. This can be used on other systems as well.
Yeah, kind of like how you could use like Pac-Man uh, on Debian.
Mhm,
You can throw it onto any system, except for with other package managers, they kind of care because you're gonna have conflicts. If you just try to installing like Firefox from the Aurora onto a Debian system, you're gonna get some weird problems without trying to hack around the problem.
sure.
But with Nix, because everything references each other, and because a Nix store exists, that doesn't matter.
Mhm,
You can have a distribution of Nix OS or Nix packages, and multiple versions of that could be in your store, and they will never conflict because they all evaluate as their own things.
mhm, mhm. So how does this like interact with the distro? Is it like symlink it to where like you would expect binaries to be, or
Yeah, so I want to explain a little bit more with how
go right ahead?
NixOS works. So with NixOS, it takes that concept of a derivation and that it going to an output and assigning it to various things for Linux. And so it does things like setting up the etc directory. So like a very simple file to kind of think of one is the OS release file.
Mhm,
If you aren't aware, that's the file that contains the metadata that defines what distribution you're on. It's a very simple file format.
mhm,
But because it's just a text file, you can make a derivation. And you can
mhm,
have it just write some text and then symlink it to that
mhm,
with a thing called an activation script. And this
mhm,
is going a little bit more into how NixOS itself works.
mhm,
You have what's called the top level derivation, which contains the stateless immutable build of your entire setup.
mhm,
So it includes your graphics drivers, your kernel, even your bootloader. A little bit of that information is in there. And then all the rebuild script does is it just builds it and then runs the dry activation script, which is a script that is just the minimal amount of stuff to set up that top level derivation so that when you reboot, you're going to get the next version that you've built. And so that's how you can kind of set up etc. And with the activation scripts, you're able to do even weirder things like set up SC Linux, or you can have it do whatever because activation scripts are just a script.
Mhm. Okay. So I'm just trying to keep up with I'm trying to keep up with Nix here. I for anyone who's not aware, I have like a surface level knowledge. I'm like learning as we're going here. I did a bit of stuff so I could like work out what to talk about, but like, you know, I might have to go back and rewatch this one to actually follow along with everything that's being said here. And I think this is one of the things with Nix and with NixOS. A lot of people have, you'll hear people talk about it, but you always hear people say, "Oh, it's difficult to learn. I don't understand how the system works," and it's a very different system than the way most distros work and most package management system works.
Yeah. So the thing with Nix is that in NixOS is you're not just learning
Mm,
how Linux works. You're learning package management, your dependency management, new language that's based around uh, a functional programming. And functional programming on its own is a difficult topic. Haskellers know that a lot because it's just a mess sometimes.
mm,
But there's just all these concepts that it takes, from what we've seen,
mm,
a lot of time for people to bring up to a good understanding of Nix. We've
mm,
actually gotten surveys that we run every year by the marketing team, and most people start picking up more of these things after 3 years of using Nix. They
mm,
start understanding all this just because it takes so much time. And for myself, that was actually the same thing. I started using NixOS back around 2022, and it's 2025 now, and I'm doing all these things.
mm,
Before, back in 2022, all I knew really how to do was like Pac-Man, uh, XBPS, which is Void Linux Package
mm,
Manager,
mm,
and all that. And so it took me a long time to figure out how to do all this stuff.
mm,
And so there's this huge learning curve. It looks like this. It takes so much effort to learn. All of a sudden, it just shoots right up because once you grasp all the concepts, there's a lot more you can start doing.
mm,
It branches out a lot further once you've kind of understood.
mm, mm,
And of course, everyone's going to learn differently. They have different learning rates and all that stuff. So there's the human factor in that.
mm, mm.
So I think it makes sense that people say it's a difficult distro to learn and difficult stuff, but there's just a lot you can get out of it.
I think conceptually, it's not that complicated of an idea, but there's a lot of Nix terminology here that like I feel like does make it a little bit harder to follow along. And I'm sure the terminology is important, but initially hearing it, I'm like, okay, wait, so that was that one. Okay, let's let's get back to that thing. Um, yeah, I look, I'm happy on Arch, but I at least initially seeing sort of the grains of why this system makes sense.
Yeah, there is a lot of terminology and stuff that's used. They make sense, like a derivation. It's a derived output,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. That's kind of like my understanding of it. But the nice thing is that things like Nix packages already exist, and NixOS already has a lot of stuff in it
Mm-hmm.
that, unless you're really wanting to get into the fine grain of how everything works,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to learn everything. You could learn just enough just to package GNU hello and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're someone like me and want to like really explore all these interesting things, then yeah, it's gonna take years, to pick up how everything works at its core.
Mhm. Okay, I want to talk a bit about the NixOS distro. So obviously, there is the Nix package manager. Actually, I don't know what side to start on here. Should we talk about the benefits of the distro first, or the benefits of the package manager outside of the distro? Which direction do you think makes more sense to approach this from?
I think it's kind of a they work both together. So a
Well,
lot
obviously
of
that
the like
but like I'm kind of
yeah.
like the point I was getting at there. Like, if you can use the Nix package manager outside of Nix, like the NixOS, the distro, what's the point of the distro itself?
Yeah, so the distro itself is a modular Linux distro. So that means the configuration,
Mhm,
it's all modularized. So it takes a lot of concepts that are from Linux
mhm, mhm,
and Linux distributions and Unix and puts them into a easy to understand way. Like if you want to change your host name,
mhm,
it's just setting networking.hostname equals this string.
mhm,
In the back end, there's a lot of stuff going on. That's going to change a hostname file, and when you rebuild, that's going to change how Etsy works, which is change the top level derivation. So re-implementing NixOS takes a lot of effort
mhm, mhm.
just because there's so much stuff that's going on.
Okay, so if I'm understanding it right, NixOS basically uses the Nix package manager for like across the entire system, whereas if you put the Nix package manager onto an existing system, you can choose how much of it you want to be in the package manager.
Yes. So with NixOS, you have your entire Linux system. You can even do like your home directory management straight through that. But with Nix on top of like Fedora or Debian or whatever,
Mhm,
you're just getting the package manager. You could theoretically migrate over to NixOS by slowly replacing things that is actually a tool someone made.
I'm sure
It's
it is.
it's cursed. It's
Do you
I
happen to know what it's called?
uh NixOS Infect. It has a very apt name because it infects your system to run NixOS. And this is actually how we got NixOS onto a lot of different VPS providers
Mhm.
because they don't let you put up an ISO, which is a bit of a problem. Because like, what if you want to change the distro? Now you're stuck with like Debian, whatever,
Mhm.
or Ubuntu 2011.
Mhm.
So NixOS Infect is a way of just moving stuff in such a way that it becomes NixOS.
Mhm. Well, actually hadn't even thought of that. So if you do have it on top of a another system, much like say with Flatpak, you could get access to a lot newer packages on something like Ubuntu 1804. I, yeah, no, that's still okay. I was just thinking, is that still supported? Yeah, technically in the super long term support. Yeah, so you could install on something older like that and get access to these newer packages.
Yeah, that's actually one of the benefits with Nix packages, which
Mhm,
is just the package stuff, is that as long as you could reference Nix packages,
mhm,
you could get like whatever. You could get the current GNOME release, you could get glibc, whatever.
mhm.
You can get the most recent version of Steam, except for that's a little bit wonky because their own stuff. But yeah, you can basically get whatever as long as you have the derivation to evaluate.
Mhm. So if I'm on a fast moving distro like an Arch Linux, a Gen 2, where there's good package support, pretty much everything you'd possibly want is packaged, what would be the benefit of including Nix on a system like that?
The benefit I could think of is instead of using just Nix, you're gonna move over to NixOS because NixOS can be thought of as both a stable and a rolling release distro. We have releases every 6 months,
Mhm,
but there is the unstable branch.
mhm,
They can just daily drive. I do it,
mhm.
other people do it, but unlike Arch, it doesn't break every 2 months because we do a lot of testing. And one of the side effects of having everything evaluate is you can rebuild the world with just a one line change.
Mhm.
So we have this pipeline of applying PRs that changes Nix packages so that things may be broken, but you're gonna still have a bootable system.
Mhm.
So that's one of the kind of more beneficial things.
You use that term "rebuild the world" there. What do you mean by that?
So that basically means like whatever package you change
Mhm,
rebuilds literally everything. Like you
mhm.
change your libc, you're gonna be rebuilding everything from like GNU Hello to Firefox to WR roots. We just say rebuild the world because you're rebuilding everything
Mhm,
at
mhm.
that point if you're gonna be changing that much.
Right, right, right.
And we have a handy little tag on GitHub that says you have like 50,000 rebuild packages, and you don't want people trying to do that on a Core 2 Duo or whatever
Right, right.
system.
Well, unless you're a psycho. I do have a friend who compiled and installed Linux on a PS2, which is time consuming.
Yeah, I used to do that with Arch Linux
Mhm.
on a what's it called? Dell Latitude E6420 back in high school.
Uh-huh.
It was slow. I do not recommend using a system that old in 2017.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Like you get yourself like a $50 mini PC. It'll be faster. So,
Yeah, well, at
oh,
least
oh,
now I have great hardware.
mm. Oh, yeah, for sure. That definitely makes your life quite a bit easier. Um, okay, so if somebody wanted to mess around with Nix, would you recommend they go straight into the distro or install the package manager on top of whatever they're currently using?
I would just say just do whatever interests you. If you want if you don't really care about NixOS,
Mhm,
fine, just use Nix itself.
mhm,
You
mhm,
can use it to manage your development environments because you can create what's called a Nix shell, and then you're just have all your dependencies there, and then you can just do Nix shell or Nix develop, and then you would get your entire development shell from your C libraries and your compilers. You can get weird things like Java and just anything.
mhm,
So it's pretty much just you can do whatever. Just try playing around with it, see what you like and things like that.
mhm. Okay, fair. Um, so let's see here. Oh, this is one that a term that I come across quite often. What is a Nix flake? Like I've heard this term so many times. I've no idea what it means.
Yeah, so we have two kind of methods of managing systems and well NixOS systems and packages and shells.
Right.
And so the legacy way
Mhm.
is you have configuration.nix
Mhm.
as your entry point for managing your NixOS system.
Mhm.
And then you have default.nix, which is the same kind of concept, but it's just going to be an attribute set or just a single derivation that builds a package or multiple sets of packages.
Mhm.
And then you have shell.nix, which is similar to default.nix, but it provides you a development shell that you can build and kind of work in.
Mhm.
Kind of imagine it as like a Docker container, but instead of entering Docker and doing all that weird madness, it just drops you into an extra shell.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, a flake is special because it tracks all of your inputs. So
Mhm.
let's say you want to have 8 different versions of NixOS.
Right.
That's just some random number I just pulled out of my head. Don't Doesn't really matter. But let's say you just want whatever package or like versions that you want to pull from these different things. You can do that. You can just add that input in, and then you lock the flake, and then it keeps track of the hash and all that inside
Mhm.
the flake lock, and then it's going to be able to track all that for you. And the flake, once you write it up, you specify your NixOS systems, your development shells, your packages. So it's a very global kind of entry point for a repository
Mhm.
to track dependencies, specify your packages, and all that. So it's a more like modern way of kind of dealing with things. Kind of, I'm not really sure what other equivalent thing that isn't Nix it would be similar to. We
Mhm.
kind of imagine like a package.json file, but it's code.
So it's a way of defining different, I guess, different subsystems, I guess? Like, maybe that's not the right term to use, but,
Yeah, not really. You can use it to like, let's say dot files.
mm,
A lot of people have dot file repos, and you want to manage your systems between uh, 5 different computers.
mm, mm, mm,
Well, you don't want to write a configuration for every single system and have duplicate lines.
mm, mm,
You can write your own modules and then plug them up, but have multiple NixOS systems in your flake.
mm,
Now, when you rebuild, it's going to check that host name and check to see if that host name is an attribute within the NixOS system's
mm,
attribute inside the flake outputs.
mm.
And so now you manage all 5 of those systems with just a lot less code.
Okay, so it's a way of defining different systems and sharing stuff between them.
Kind of think of it as a more way of tracking uh, Nix dependencies and then being able to specify what you want to output.
Right. I think I understand where we're going here.
Yeah. The problem is there isn't any like other thing that is on this level of complexity
Mhm,
and this amount of possibility that a Nix flake provides
mhm,
in
mhm.
other spaces. Terraform doesn't really have a thing because Terraform and Ansible kind of get lumped into Nix. There isn't really an equivalent thing outside of Nix space that I'm aware of.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's
on
hard
the
to explain that to someone.
sorry, in the Nix docs, there are literally two subsections. Why are flakes controversial, and should I use flakes in my project? So even in the Nix project, it's like we're not entirely we're not all fully set on the exact. Or should everybody use this?
Yeah, that is changing kind of
Mm-hmm.
because one of the implementations of the Nix package manager,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they've considered Flake stable,
Mm-hmm.
and at this point, a lot of people use the legacy way of managing things, and then they eventually move over to Flakes.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, it's in the middle point of like, is it the thing that everyone's going to use, or is there going to be something else?
Mm-hmm.
No one else has come up with an alternative, so everything's kind of moving over to Flakes. But the legacy way is still going to be supported for a long time.
Is this one of those things you actually need to care about if you're just starting to learn Nix? Or is this one of those things where it's like, hey, if I want to spend all of my day, I want to become the future release manager and learn everything about this system that you need to care about?
I mean, if you want to learn everything, definitely learn Flakes. It's one of those things that you should. But if you're playing around, take a look at it at some point. It's one of those things where it complicates things more,
Mhm.
but the amount of like benefits you get out of it, of just easily managing your dependencies
Mhm.
and easily just doing entry points into
Mhm.
your repos.
Mhm.
It's just it's just going to make things easier,
Mhm. Mhm.
but it's more complicated to learn.
Mhm. Okay. So Nix does a lot of things, but what would you say is the main problem that Nix is attempting to solve?
I'd say reproducibility
Mhm.
and dependency management because those kind of come hand in hand. And the way Nick sort of solves this is everything's predictable,
Mhm.
and by being predictable, you're reproducible. It's not a one on. You don't get one without the other exactly,
Mhm.
but they come hand in hand.
Mhm.
And the way Nick does this is by doing like having the evaluation to where it only references this specific package for its dependency. It's just me using that.
Mhm.
But some packages and stuff like C compilers like to tag things in, like the time something built
Mhm.
or some arbitrary path. And so we have these concepts and stuff, or not really concepts, these different features
Mhm.
within Nix packages. Strips that information out.
Mhm.
And so what we can do is as long as your operating system and your CPU and generic bit of build configurations the same,
Mhm.
you can build the same package on two different systems or at two different times of the day,
Mhm.
and they should be a binary equivalent.
Mhm.
You could do a diff, and they should show it's exactly the same number of duplicate bytes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, of course, you have some weird things like C compilers. I think Java's one of those weird things. Google projects, because Google packages things weirdly, that getting them reproducible is hard,
Mhm.
but not impossible.
Mhm. Mhm.
And since it's reproducible, you've kind of solved the dependency management problem.
Mhm. Reproducibility is a very loaded term that a lot of people don't really understand correctly. Um, and you often hear discussions like, "Oh, this system is fully reproducible. That system is fully reproducible." Um, when we say reproducibility, let's just focus specifically on that. What does that term itself mean, and why would you care about it, right? Like, let's say you have a system where you compile an application, it's the same application, it looks the same to the user, but it's not going to be binary equivalent. What is the benefit of it being binary equivalent? But yeah, start with just to
Yes.
focus on the reproducibility term itself.
Yeah, so kind of think of it as basic math. You have a function which takes two arguments, A and B.
Mhm.
And you just do a simple operation of A plus B. And so you let's say you plug in 1 for A and B is 2, that is going to be 3.
Mhm.
So that kind of idea of just like as long as your inputs are the same,
Mhm.
the output should be predictable.
Mhm.
And so this kind of goes a little bit more back into the language where because we have the hash, we know what things should output like.
Mhm.
But that's only for evaluations.
Mhm.
And so we apply this concept to the packages we build,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and from there, we're able to guarantee that these packages are going to be able to operate the same and debug the same and do anything the same anywhere.
Mhm.
And reproducibility is important because let's say you have a regression
Mhm.
with something and you want to track it.
Mhm. Mhm.
How do you do that? You bisect it.
Mhm.
But what happens when something doesn't match up because it's not reproducible? You could get a false positive of what looks like it could be a problem,
Mhm.
but it could be, this date changed inside the build hash, causing things to change around. You don't want that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So reproducing that to where it's going to be the same in 20 years as it was 5 weeks ago makes that a lot easier.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it doesn't even have to be for like debugging. It could be for uh, like modular management of like some programs have a way of being able to add plugins and stuff, and
Mhm.
sometimes they want things to order correctly. Being able to reproduce it correctly makes sense there. And so it kind of depends on what you're wanting, but it at the end of the day, it is a concept that should apply everywhere.
Right. Yeah, reproducibility and the value of it really depends on where in the product chain you're sort of sitting, right? Like if you're in a corporate environment, having reproducible builds is more resilient against software attacks because you can verify the build you have is the build that it is supposed to be.
Yeah, especially for like that kind of thing, or even like servers. Like, let's say
Mm-hmm.
you are on a DevOps team and you have to manage 20 servers. You want it where everything's going to be the same
Right.
because the idea is you want to minimize the amount of variables. By minimizing the amount of variables down, you have a lot more predictability, right? Being able to predict things, you can then squash bugs easier
Mm-hmm.
or easily because you know exactly what's going on.
Okay, so we're just gonna. I've just been jumping around between different Nix topics. I'm not really sure the best way to connect these things together. Um, but I guess let's talk about package rollbacks because that's a big one that a lot of systems just don't have anything really in place to do so. Like Arch, you can roll back a package, but basically what that means is going to the package archive repo and then installing the old version of the package, which potentially, if you're doing something low level enough, could break the entire system. But that's not the sort of thing we're talking about here. And with the way we've talked about how packages work, where they're all stored in their own separate directory with their own ID and they control their own dependency management, it sounds like rollbacks, and it mentioned on the homepage here that rollbacks are something that are easy to do. How are rollbacks facilitated through Nix?
So the way you do it is, as you're aware, everything evaluates,
Mm-hmm.
and so the inputs, which are your attributes,
Mm-hmm.
to that attribute set that's passed through your creation,
Mm-hmm.
you basically just undo the change. Like, oh, you have this source that points to, like, let's say 0.1.6,
Mm-hmm.
and oh, that is broken. When you roll back to 0.1.5, what you do is you just change the source.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, you have the old version. And luckily for you, if it's in your cache or somewhere that you can get it from, you don't even have to rebuild it because nothing else changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can actually apply this to NixOS a little bit further by having multiple generations of your system.
Mm-hmm.
To where, let's say, generation 20 broke,
Mm-hmm.
just reboot. Go back to generation 19, nothing's broken. And so you're able to just manage things a lot easily as long as you can work backwards from going forwards.
Mm-hmm. When a lot of people talk about rollbacks on Linux distros, a lot of the focus right now are on these I don't know what term you like using for them, these image based or immutable atomic distros where basically you just roll back the entire system and you just have multiple versions of the system installed. But Nix is more akin to traditional package management. Obviously it's still Nix's different Nix system, but it's not like you can roll back individual things, right? It's still you're handling packages separately from each other.
Yeah, so you can easily just roll back things like that and because NixOS isn't really immutable,
Hmm.
it kind of actually is because
Hmm.
you can't just arbitrarily write to the Nix store. And so
Hmm.
the kind of benefit you get is Nix is only going to touch Nix things.
Hmm.
When you roll back an image-based distro, you're going to be rolling back a lot of things. You're going to have a lot of downloads. You just have a lot more complexity. With
Hmm.
this, you can just roll back one single thing, and that's it. The layer operation, you don't have to even download that much,
Hmm.
and it's just simpler.
Right, I have heard anytime the discussion of immutable distros comes up, it is like the topic of Nix comes up as well. It's obviously very different from, a Silverblue, but it's approaching that immutability problem in a different way.
Yeah, so like with immutable distros, typically people do
I don't
things like
like the
lock
term
root
personally.
files.
I like image based. It's such, there's no good term for it because there's no individual word that explains everything that a Silverblue like distro really encompasses.
Yeah, like those kinds of things, they do weird things that
Mm-hmm.
certain packages may not like. Like I know systemd doesn't quite like having your root file system locked,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you want to be able to change around your system at runtime, especially if you're messing with something weird like Xorg,
Mm.
because video drivers and stuff like that don't quite always apply. And so the kind of benefit you get with Nix is you can change things
Mm-hmm.
without like having to. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. With like a locked root FS,
Mm-hmm.
you just can't touch anything. But with NixOS, you can still touch your etc and all that as long as you have the permission.
Mm-hmm.
But if you reboot, your changes are rolled back because the system reactivates. So you can kind of test drive some things at runtime,
Mm-hmm.
make your fixes whatever, and then update your configuration, and now you kind of locked things in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
so you can have more of an agile like workaround method to try to figure out why is this thing not working, and things generally play nicer since you're not messing with weird file system permissions and stuff like that. It's just you have a single directory that is locked behind a daemon,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's really it.
Yeah, there's this random comment on Reddit I see where someone described it as iteratively immutable, which I think makes it. Well, I I I don't know. Look, again,
That's
Reddit
a funny
comments.
way of
Yeah,
describing it.
I don't know. Like it definitely sounds like it makes more sense as a system. I don't think it makes sense to go full down the route of things like Silverblue. Like they're like the approach they're taking is locked file system and then do everything in Flatpaks, which works for a lot of stuff, but you if you're on if you're on Silverblue and you want to go and install different drivers, for example, you've got to then start building your own images, which gets it.
And with that, if you want to support weird hardware, like let's say ARM MacBooks,
Mm.
well, I mean Fedora supports it, but that's a little bit different. Like if you want to support like odd hardware, like Linux phones, or I
Mm.
mean Android phones, immutable distros, you're gonna have to rebuild everything. It's just there is a lot more to work with. With Nix, if it's just hey, it's a derivation that spits out a disk image, you're gonna be able to simplify things a lot more.
Mm.
And so you also get the benefit of it being all in code
Mhm.
through Nix. So it's just a lot easier to manage than like 20 bash scripts and weird commands you have to memorize. I mean, Nix does have its
Yeah,
weird
I
commands,
was gonna say, don't
but
start
they're
talking about weird commands in Nix.
but I mean, Nix's commands are a lot easier to understand because like it's Nix build, and then you say what you want to build.
Mhm.
You can do some extra things like say like checking how much jobs you want to run and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But every build system has that sort of thing. But you don't have weird flags like to change like debugging, or I mean, well, Nix does have that. It's hard to explain. It puts those flags behind an easier to understand abstraction.
Right. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think these distros like Silverblue, like SteamOS, they make sense. I think they make a lot of sense for like appliance type devices where there is a set piece of hardware. Like the Steam Deck is a perfect sort of device for something like that. It's not really treated like a, you can use it like a computer, but it's a console. You update the console when the update comes out. And for certain kinds of people who don't really modify their system, who can get away with doing everything in flat packs, yeah, it's fine. Um,
Yeah,
I think they have a place, but there's a lot of people who think they are going to take over the entire world of Linux, which I frankly don't see.
yeah. I mean, you can actually do a lot of appliance things with Nix just because it's like, hey, instead of this thing like build root or
Mhm,
like Yocto, it's just a Nix image. You
mhm,
just build it and flash it,
mhm,
and you can treat it like your regular mutable system,
mhm,
even though it's a little bit of a different concept. It can do the same thing.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
But there is benefits of having things like Silverblue already exist. It depends on like what you want to do really
Sure.
and what you're comfortable with.
Mhm. Right, yeah, a lot of people may not be comfortable jumping into Nix. And this, as I was saying earlier, this is one of the common things that comes up with Nix. We're not going to rehash that topic again, but it is definitely something that comes up quite frequently with Nix, where it's like, oh, I think the idea is cool, but like, I don't really know where to get started with it. Um, One thing I wanted to ask, and this is kind of jumping back to the thing about rollbacks. Um, I was just having a look at the how Nix works page, and it mentions when you uninstall a package, the package isn't actually uninstalled. It sits around in what it refers to in a state waiting to be garbage collected, which usually is a term that you hear for programming languages. I guess it's just using the term garbage collection here as a way to basically mean cache.
Yeah, I mean there is not really a better word than garbage collection to
Mhm,
describe it because you can kind of think of an Nix derivation as like an object,
mhm.
and then it's like, oh, this object is unused,
Right.
so just clean it up. It's a garbage collection.
Mhm, mhm,
And so at that point, when you unreference a package, if you have automatic garbage collection or you run the nix collect garbage command,
mhm, mhm,
it's going to look for every single derivation that is unreferenced and its parents. And if
mhm,
those are unreferenced, it's just going to remove them
mhm.
because why is it there if no one's using them?
Yeah, fair. Um, I don't know why this didn't come up before when we were talking about rollbacks. Um, but also atomic upgrades. This is another important thing these other distros attempt to resolve as well, and that also seems to be a thing here as well.
I've heard of atomic upgrades,
It
but I'm not
mentions
really
it
sure.
literally on the website for Nix, so I assume this is something important.
Let's see. What is atomic rollbacks?
Perfect.
I've heard of this. No, I don't want the Django stuff.
This is not the direction I thought it would go.
Yeah. I mean, I probably understand the concept if I could figure out what atomic rollbacks means,
Uh,
or like atomic upgrades.
what it is saying here, since package management operations never overwrite packages in the Nix store, but just add new versions in different paths, they are atomic. What a great explanation. Jesus Christ, that's... Maybe someone should rewrite that one.
Yeah, I'm not
So
really
during
sure
a
what it means
package
by
upgrade...
atomic.
Oh, hold up. So during a package upgrade, there is no time window which the packages some files from the old version and some files from the new version, which would be bad because a program might well crash if it started during that period.
Ah, now I understand what it's meaning. So, the way Nix fetches things and builds things is it doesn't expose them until it is there. Because like you don't want to be using Firefox when it's halfway downloaded. It's not going to start.
Sure.
So it puts it into some sort of limbo, and then once it's there, you have it.
Fair.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what it means by atomic in that concept or
Sure.
context.
Right. No, that's fair. I'm happy that I found a term used in Nix that managed to stump you. That's a fun one.
Yeah, because also atomics are a concept in systems programming,
Sure.
and I'm not sure if it's meaning like atomics as in like atomic instructions and like mutex locks, and it's like
Right. Okay.
those
Fair.
could mean two completely different things. They're yeah.
Right. There's a lot of tech and programming terminology which overlaps with other segments, which mean entirely different things. As for anyone who might not be a programmer, a great example is the like common usage of the word theory and the scientific usage, where the common usage basically it just means guess. Like it's like, oh, I have a theory that the aliens might have built the pyramids. I don't know. The scientific definition is basically I don't remember the exact dictionary definition. It's you have like a well-formed a well-formed understanding. You have something that is backed by evidence that by all accounts seems to be what is happening. That I guess is a bad way to explain it, but gets the point across.
Yeah, there's a lot of word usage in tech.
Immutability is a great example of it, where immutability in one sense means unchanging, but we're using it to mean these systems which are temporarily unchanging, which is great.
Yeah, it's also a type of variable in Rust.
Yes, that's another fun one. Oh, God. I hate the tech world sometimes.
Oh, it's fun.
Well, it's fine when these terms sort of evolve independently. It's when the terms get reused where it really bothers me. Like you especially when you like again going back to what I said about immutability, where the term was already around and people were like, it's good enough. Let's go with that one.
Especially as like standards and things change. Like I believe there was a bit of this problem of things changing from the Unix side of things to more of a Linux style of things, kind of as things evolved and people moved away from Unix. Like, I'm pretty sure there's concepts there that got reused and kind of lost their meaning. Because, like, a good one's a TTY. Not a lot of people are using a teletype interface to interface with a computer.
Right.
They're using a graphics card and a keyboard and a monitor, but we still call that TTY.
Yeah, the terminal emulator is in the same sort of... terminal emulator and TTY are technically entirely interchangeable terms, like in the way they're currently used, but like again, it's like they do actually have very distinct meanings. Also, my camera has just gone out of focus. You know,
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah,
yeah,
like
there we
with
go. Back.
TTYs, we all use traditionally a pseudo TTY, where
Yeah,
it
well,
is not a
really, it's a
physical
TTY
TTY.
emulator. If you want to be actually explaining what it is.
Yeah, it's usually implement something like a VT100
Mhm,
where handles all the fancy or ANSI control stuff
mhm.
and ASCII characters and stuff like that. Where it's like, yeah, but it's one of those stupid word reuses
Mhm.
that's lasted over like 30 years.
Yeah, but at this point, like, the distinction doesn't even matter because no one is using a physical terminal anyway. So, like, any physical terminals are at this point just a monitor with a keyboard like plugged in as well.
Unless you're doing something weird like firmware development or like building, like doing that kind of like hardware usage,
Mhm,
but still you have a serial chip that does the communication, and it you still use a terminal emulator at that
mhm.
point.
Yeah.
Like something like GNU Screen that is still emulating a terminal.
Mhm,
Even though it's a little bit of hardware mixed in, it's still emulating a terminal.
mhm, mhm. So going back to Nix for one moment, this is not something which the regular user is gonna, in most cases, at all be affected by. Um, Nix and multi-user systems. Most people don't have a multi-user system. Like you're just the one person in your system, and that's it. But I did see in here, and I think with what I've heard so far, this makes sense how this works. But it mentions that Nix does have support for multi-user setups as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that with like any old Linux distro, but with Nix, you can go a little bit further because, like earlier I mentioned, you can manage your home files.
Mm-mm.
And so it's not really built in NixOS specifically or Nix itself. It's a separate project. But you can do your own kind of style. It's called Home Manager. It is a way of to manage your home directly, basically. And you can build up a method and a workflow where you can manage like 8 different users that
Mhm,
has a different desktop environment, different files, different text editors, and only those users will have access to that.
mhm,
So it's like you have a user called Alice, and then you have a user called Bob. One uses Vim, the other one uses Emacs. One could try calling the other,
mhm,
and it wouldn't be in their path.
mhm, mhm,
And one could have a picture of a bird as a background picture,
mhm,
and the other one could have like a dog. And they're not going to see each other's files, but they could look at the dot files and kind of see what's going on. But I mean, it's a more advanced like concept of being able to manage multiple users, and something that is actually great for uh, the community provided builders.
mhm, mhm.
We have like 100 users on the different builders, and everyone just has their own setup that's separate from each other, and we
Mhm,
just manage it all through this. Just a single addition of a new line, add your SSH key,
mhm,
you've got access.
mhm, mhm. Okay. So I wanted to ask you about sort of your history with Linux and your history with Nix, because you mentioned you've been doing this for a couple of years now. But when did you start using Linux, and when did you eventually find your way to Nix, and like what actually attracted you to it?
So originally,
Mhm.
I started. I'm gonna get kind of a bit more of like me starting as a programmer.
Okay.
So when I was 11,
Mhm.
I wanted to build a website. This was back in 2012. Most website builders, as far as I am aware, were paid, and it's hard to install when you don't have like admin access on a Windows laptop
Mhm, mhm.
to just install arbitrary programs.
Right.
So I took out Notepad and I learned HTML. Sometime later, I learned JavaScript,
Mhm.
CSS. From there, I learned Python, Ruby, Lua, all that. Eventually, I started getting into like, oh, what's Linux?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was in Scouts at the time, and my Scoutmaster, he used to be he might still be, I'm not sure, a administrator for a school district,
Mhm.
and so he got me into the idea. I started out with Ubuntu. I think it was like Ubuntu 12, 11, whatever, somewhere around that time.
Okay.
This is like 13 years ago, so I don't remember everything. And basically, from there, I started learning things like Java and how to make Minecraft mods, how to use lightweight Java game library to make like do OpenGL stuff,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. Uh, then eventually, I don't know how, I was like, I want to build an operating system.
Uh-huh.
And at this point, I was in middle school.
Aha. Perfect
So,
time. Yes.
so I found the OS Div Wiki and I got a Hello World. And since then, that's been a large thing of what I've done
Mhm.
is being able to do systems programming and doing stuff like learning assembly in a week and learning all these different things for systems programming. And eventually, switched around random distros. Like I used Fedora at some point. Eventually, I reached high school. I was like, I've been using Ubuntu for however long.
Mhm.
It's time for me to use Arch.
Mhm.
And so the morning before school, one day, I think this was like sophomore,
Mm.
I was like, it's time to install Arch Linux. Big mistake, because my first period class was writing. And the first thing we needed was Google Docs. And guess who didn't have network access? I forgot to install WPA Supplicant. So I had to pull out an Ethernet cable and get that all set up and figure out how to get networking working and all that. And eventually, a few years later, I was like, oh, I heard about Void Linux.
Mhm.
I'll try Void. And then at that time, I'd been living in Oregon my entire life. And so we kind of get into 2022 now. And I moved down here for family reasons to Southern California. And the thing with the US is every state is kind of like its own country.
Right. Right.
And so things are different across states. And the problem I ran into was the power at the new house is a little bit different
Okay.
to the point that my overclock would kill my system. So,
That's a new one.
so, so guess whose file system corrupted?
Ooh. Ooh.
My file system corrupted, and I'm like, everything is gone. So, I was like, I've heard of this Linux distro called NixOS.
Mhm.
My current drive is not going to be recoverable. The ext partition is completely screwed up.
Mm.
There's no chance of recovering that. So I got the ISO. I installed it. I had Node. I had a basic Linux system.
Mhm.
And then I was like, what more can I do? And I just kept on learning, kept on figuring things out. Eventually, I was like, oh, this package called Lens, which is for Kubernetes stuff, is out of date.
Mhm.
No one else is updating it. There is one maintainer, but he hasn't touched it in like 6 months. I'll figure out how to update a package. So I did it.
Mhm.
I was like, like this other person isn't going to maintain it, so I'll pick it up as a maintainer. And from there, I kind of did other stuff. I eventually picked up Zig again,
Hmm.
and this was 2 years ago now. And then I was like, oh, this new version of Zig needs a newer version of LLVM that's not in Nix packages. Guess I'll package it. So I built it, pull request it. Okay, I got that done.
Hmm. Hmm.
I play around with some other stuff, learn some other things. I was like, oh, I need another version of LLVM. I'll update it.
Hmm.
But now, getting to the point of NixCon North America from 2024,
Hmm.
and the person who was maintaining it, mostly there's like 5 people in total. He wasn't touching it. Didn't have the time. Things happen with maintainers like that all the time, and so I'll maintain it now. And through there, I kind of did the work of cleaning up LLVM because, fun fact, LLVM isn't just LLVM. It has a million things to it.
Right.
And so we'd been packaging LLVM versions since LLVM 12.
Right.
And LLVM releases every 6 months. And so we had like each of those had their own version of each package inside of them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we had like 100 files, and there's like a million duplicate lines. So I did the painstaking thing of removing every single duplicate line and folding things together so there is a common entry point for each package and each version.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I cleaned up LLVM.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then from there, I was like, I want to do more. What else is there? Oh, there's all these packages that are unmaintained. I'll pick them up. So then now I maintain SE Linux. I maintain Flutter. And I was like, oh, I want to build the Flutter engine because I want to embed Flutter into a Wayland compositor. It's like, oh, I'll figure out how to build Flutter. Turns out Google sucks at packaging. They have this thing called default tools, which calls their own version of Python that they have pre-built from a Go binary. It is as cursed as it sounds. And I built it and I made it reproducible. And so I maintained Flutter. And
Yeah,
then I
this
was
is
like,
why I
oh,
believe they recommend. Is it? They recommend a snap package or something? I know they have a package for it.
the kind of expected way you download it is you just git clone the directory and then or git clone their GitHub
Maybe I'm thinking of a different
and then
dumb project then.
you just call the shell script which then downloads from their binary. The thing is Google sucks at packaging.
I can tell, yeah.
Um, but yeah, from there I got the Flutter agent packaged, and then I was like, oh, we have the standard environment which provides things like the C compiler, your core utils,
Mhm.
all of that. No one's maintaining that. And so now at the point of October of last year,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, I'll pick it up. And so now I maintain the standard environment along with like 5 other people. And at some point I got a commit bit.
Mhm.
And so I can break Nix for everyone else and stuff like that. And then eventually, because of the other LLVM stuff I do, like, oh, I want to get Clang running inside of UEFI. I got a LLVM commit bit and all that, and we're up to today now.
Having that kind of power is fun. A friend of mine just got employed with the KDEV and was given master branch commit rights on KDE.
Ooh, yeah. And the thing is, in Nix packages, we kind of want to limit how much the commit bit can do, but the
Mhm.
problem is GitHub was like, no, committers can do a lot.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, yeah, committers can do kind of abuse things, but everyone kind of doesn't because we're good.
Mhm. That story you had about installing Arch just before class. I've brought this up on the podcast a number of times. This is very reminiscent of the stupid way I did it. So I was in my second year of university at the time. I installed it like the day the holidays ended. So I was in class with a TTY, uh, just trying to like connect to the university network for the entire class. Now, the fun part about the class is I was in a cloud development class. So, it's kind of on brand. I'm using Linux. We're doing Linux things. But I did not get much stuff done during that class for that first day or the first couple of days after that because there was a lot of stuff that I just didn't really think about. There was some software we needed to have that I didn't really think about. So, I had to set up VMs for
Like
some of
Docker?
that. Uh, no, for other classes, not for that class. Um,
Oh,
I had like what do you call it? Like a UI design class we needed some software for, and we needed to use something specific because they wanted the project file for it, which is always fun. Um, so I very much know that story myself. Don't install Arch or any system you're not familiar with just before you need to use the system. Bad idea.
yeah. And the fair thing with my situation was, oh, it's a writing class.
Hmm.
You would think you wouldn't really need to do stuff until they're like, oh, hey, open up this thing in your Google Drive that I've shared with you. It's like, oh, I don't even have networking working. I
I
just have
don't
a
know how you
desktop.
didn't think of that one. That's crazy. That's such a thing to miss.
So I think the thing was like, WPA supplicant was installed,
Hmm.
but it wasn't set up, and I didn't have Network Manager.
Right.
And WPA supplicant isn't great to mess with because you have to remember the commands inside of it, and it's just a pain in the butt to mess with.
Right. Right.
And so I was like, I'll just grab an Ethernet cable and just plug into the wall.
Hmm. Yeah. In my case, I couldn't work out how to do the network verification because they had like a thing on the university site like what like what do you call it, the security it needed to be
Oh,
set to, or
yeah, gateway,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
gateway thing.
Yeah, and I could not work out how to do a lot of the stuff, so I was just trying to like, how do we do this? Luckily, I did know someone who was messing around with Linux themselves, and they could help me with it, which is nice. Um, Again, I don't recommend doing this. Get things working beforehand.
Yeah, don't rush installing a advanced Linux distro.
It does make you learn it quickly, though.
Yeah, it makes you go in a hurry.
It's just maybe not the best way to handle class though.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned eventually making your way to Nix and starting to manage packages, but what about Nix was it that attracted you? Because you mentioned your file system had corrupted, but I'm not really seeing the link between those 2 points.
So my thinking was, well, if the system crashed, and if all my dot files is on GitHub, it'd be a lot easier to set up because I just do a single command and just get everything done.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, that's how I was able to install into other systems I have so
Hmm.
easily. Was my setup was is all ready to go. It has my desktop environment. It has my shell. It has my text editor. It has Git prepared.
Hmm.
And so all I have to do is just partition, do a couple of things with maybe like the graphics drivers and partitioning,
Hmm.
and then just install. And I could bring up a new system in like 10 minutes and then spend the rest time just waiting for it to fetch and build.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, actually makes a lot of sense then. Now, you're not just a package maintainer. As you mentioned earlier in the show, you also were involved in the release management of 2411. So how did that come
Yes.
about?
Um, that's a good question. I do not remember.
Well, maybe start with
I
what does a release manager do, and then we can go from there.
So it's kind of in the title.
Mhm.
You managed a release. So
Thank you.
basically, you are like, yeah, you're like, hey, this is gonna be the schedule.
Mhm.
This is what's critical. Let's get to it. Let's do all this stuff. Make sure all the branches are set up.
Mhm.
Uh, Stuff like that. You also get to pick the icon for the release. You get to pick the next release's name,
Mhm.
which actually with 2505, since I was release manager for 2411, I got to pick 2505.
Mhm.
I named it Warbler,
Mhm.
and that's actually the name of the street I lived on in Oregon.
Mm.
So it's kind of and Warbler is actually the name of a small bird that I believe is how I came to it because things are named after animals. So it's like,
Right, right, right.
oh, this could be a little bit of an Easter egg that says, hey, I did the previous release.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Oh yeah, you get to do all the kind of things. You're basically like sort of the BDFL for the release.
Right.
You do work with the previous release manager,
Mhm.
but they are there to kind of like give guidance and be like, oh, this thing you might have forgotten about, or it's like, hey, I have this question for you. What do you think about this? Stuff like that. It's a very like kind of like mentorship kind of position, but a lot of the stuff is already on the release management wiki,
Right.
and so we're all just copying, pasting, and kind of just like going through that.
Mhm. So it's pretty much just making sure that everything is in order, and yeah.
Yeah, you set the timeline for the release. I put it over so that it wouldn't interfere with Thanksgiving
Mhm.
because it's hard to push out a major release when there's a holiday.
Right, right. Sure, that's fair.
Yeah,
So
so
okay,
that's pretty much it to release.
yeah. What made you? Well, yeah. What brought you to that position? What made you want to do that?
I do not remember why. I think it was just like this seems like an interesting to do.
Mm.
So then I kind of was like, I want to do this now, and I did it. And that's kind of just how it happened.
You know what?
That's been my
Yeah,
entire tech life. Is just like, hey, I want to do this thing. I'll do it.
yeah. Hey, like, I've had people that give me these like big long spiels about like this is like I had Nate Graham on here yesterday, and he went on like a 10-minute rant. That's the for anyone who doesn't know, this guy who writes This Week in KDE. He has what is it, Adventures in KDE, I think is his personal blog. Um, does he's on the KDE board. He went on like a 10-minute rant about how he joined the KDE project because he felt like this was like a good thing for the world. We need more open source software. We need good open source software. We can't have these major companies screwing people over. And then you'll hear is just like, I did it because I did it.
Yeah.
It's a nice change of pace. I'll take it.
I mean, I couldn't think of any other reason of what it would be because
Mm.
I don't not really recall. It's just like, oh, this seems interesting. Just do it.
Like the experience was there, so you wanted to see how it went.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I,
and you'd already been like fairly active in the Nix space as well. Like you'd been. How many packages do you maintain?
do you want to count every LLVM version in subpackage?
If you want to.
Okay. So there's LLVM 12 to 21.
Uh huh.
Each of those has Let's see. There's Clang, LLVM, FinTools, Compiler RT, libc, libcxx, OpenMP. So that's at least 7. MLIR, um, LODB, LLD. There's like 20 things. So that's already like 8, 9 versions times 10 packages. So that's like 90 there. And then you have the 5 Flutter versions, and then you have the 5 different packages for SC Linux, and then Zig with its 3 versions. We have Zonenix, then we have what else is there? What else do I maintain? Oh, Lens,
Mhm.
the first package I picked up.
Mhm.
So I managed like over 100 probably. I'm on Repology, so people could just plug in the email that I have on GitHub.
But I always forget this website exists. I don't want to do it right now. I'll check and look afterwards. If anyone wants to go look it up and let me know in the comments, do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. Oh, and technically the standard environment is its own package,
Mhm.
so that's another package.
Okay, so the answer is a lot.
Yes, enough
So,
to break your system.
so since you're already doing all of that, it's like, hey, this is sort of a natural progression. Might as well just see how it goes.
Yeah, that's kind of how things seem to be, I
Mhm.
think. I don't know.
So you've mentioned earlier that Nix has been getting like more traction, more popularity. Where do you see that going? Right? Because like obviously the current direction that we have for handling dependencies across different systems is like Flatpak. Like this seems to be the main way that things are being done. Snaps Canonical wants them to be, but not outside of Ubuntu. And app images, some projects have them, some don't, but Flatpak's clearly the thing that the FOSS space is like rallying behind. But where do you see Nix fitting in here, and where do you really see Nix going?
I see. I'm not really sure. Um, it's kind of all over the place. It could be. There's a lot of different ways Nix could go. I could see someone potentially writing like something kind of like bottles, but it is like a flat pack kind of thing where it's like, here's your store of like your marketplace, but it's all Nix stuff that you can easily manage through there instead of having to manage like your stuff, and then you just have that on top of like Ubuntu or whatever.
Mhm.
That could be something someone makes. But I see NixOS kind of just sticking around like Arch Linux, where it's like, hey, it exists. It's the advanced distro that everyone's gonna probably try out at some point.
Right. Okay. Okay. Um. So I don't know if you know anything about it. If you don't, we can just move past this. But anytime the topic of Nix comes up, there's also mentions of other projects like the GNU Geeks project, which I understand try to serve a similar function. I don't know if you know anything about that though, and can really comment on that.
I know a little about GUIX. I
I don't.
heard
Yeah, I don't know
it's
how to
a
say
fork.
it. People have told me it's geeks, so that's what I've been going with.
It could be because you're Australian, I'm American, different accents. I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
I always say GUIX because that's what it looks like it says.
Mhm. That's
But
what I used to
from
say, and
what
then
I
people
know,
complained about it. So I don't know.
who's gonna stop me from saying it? But yeah. Uh, from what I've heard, GUIX is a fork of Nix. That's as far as I know. I know it's like that, but it's trying to shoehorn into like Gen 2 basically. I don't know. I've never used that specific thing before.
Yeah. I wasn't sure like if you knew anything about it. Like, if not, we can just move past that. That's all good.
It's been thrown around a lot. I've seen about it.
Mhm.
I've looked it up. Never played with it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That's
I
understandable.
I know I know I know about it. Yeah.
Right. Right.
But I
Right.
don't know enough to like ramble on about it.
Mhm. So, if people are maybe interested in the Nix project, not just as like a user, but somebody wants to get more involved in the project, they maybe want to start like managing packages or helping out with documentation, things like that. Um, what do you think is an area that needs the most support right now, and where can people go to start helping out with that?
So two places, as always, documentation
Mhm.
always needs improvement. Uh, I mean that's probably true for any project out there that's
Right, right.
large. Um, and then just maintainership. Nix packages at this point is at like 140,000 packages. It is essentially the largest package repository for systems packages out there. We have Python packages, we have Node packages. Having people maintain all those is difficult. There is a lot of people like myself who maintain a lot of duplicate packages or even just like a lot of different packages. And the problem with that, it kind of strains out a lot of people.
Mhm.
We only have like last time I looked was about a year ago, and it was like 230 committers,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of people involved in Nix. We have a lot of PRs, and so just reviewing packages, helping out with documentation, picking up packages that haven't been touched in like 2 years or hasn't or is out of date, just whatever you kind of see that like you think needs improvement is always welcome and it always helps out.
Mhm. So if somebody wanted to get involved with that, what would they need to do? Where would they go?
Um, I would think the NixOS matrix space because that's where everyone is at.
Mhm.
There is the unofficial Discord, but that's unofficial.
Sure.
I'm on there. A few prominent people like Tom Barrick, he's another committer, and a previous release manager. A lot of people are there, but the matrix is like the centralized place to go,
Mhm. And then
and
you
you
can
can kind
like
of coordinate with other people.
right, and then you can sort of ask about who needs support, where things are lacking, and sort of direct yourself. Or I guess even if you don't have like a set thing you want to like, it obviously going and like filling in gaps is important, but even if you just want to like get involved and just like maybe you notice maybe 140,000 packages, maybe there's something that's missing there, and you just want to put it up there, and then no one's done before. Obviously, that's
Yeah,
more
because
maintainership burden. There's a lot of things then, but like, there's no reason why you have to just fill in gaps if that's not a thing that is interesting to you.
yeah, there's a lot people can do. There's a lot of open issues that even if you don't maintain something, you can look at an issue and try to help resolve it to get it closed.
Mhm.
Just whatever you feel like really is what's possible.
Mhm. There's a lot of work there, and not as many people as you would expect for the amount of work, I guess.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of easy, I think, to get involved with Nix
Mhm.
because it's a mono repo on GitHub. All you need to have is a GitHub account. Practically everyone in FOSS has a GitHub account.
Mhm.
Uh, you just need Nix itself. You don't have to be running NixOS. You just need Nix
Mhm.
and a GitHub account and some free time,
Mhm.
and then just do something.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Nix repo as 3,200 open issues.
Yeah, look at how many commits we have.
Wait, where's the number?
It's gonna be on the home.
Sorry, I had the for my overlay, I have it like squashed down into like a mini view and disk that GitHub was hiding it. 19,703 on Nix itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on Nix packages, 779,000.
Yeah, we have a lot of activity going on, and there's basically a commit like or a merge happening like every 30 minutes.
How does Git behave with a commit history that long? Does if you run the history command, what happens?
Oh, so do not run git log or git
Yeah,
history
yeah, yeah. Log, that's what I'm
because
thinking of.
it's gonna take forever. Especially do not do it when you have like 1 gig of RAM. I don't know what you'd be doing with 1 gig of RAM in 2025,
Mm-hmm.
but do not do it unless you are ready for your CPU to struggle on a single core.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that single core is just going to compute everything for the past like 20 years that repos existed.
That's fun. It's probably, yeah. I'd imagine the Linux kernel probably has the exact same problem there, where it's just like never touch that command.
Yeah, so does LLVM. I think LLVM is at like 1.2 million commits. I
Jesus.
think the Linux kernel's at like 12 million or something like that. Those two repos have several times more commits than Nix packages does.
Does Git have the option to do history paging? Because it should.
Um, no, I think it computes everything and then outputs it. Because the way Git works is the parent commit
Mm.
gets you affects the revision hash
Mm.
of the previous commit of the next commit.
Mm.
So it
Mm.
needs to
Mm.
compute the previous to get to the next.
Mm.
I don't know how git commit exactly does that in a way that doesn't slow down every time you make a git commit, but there is just doing a git
Also,
log of just
committing still works
everything.
fine. You're not waiting 30 minutes for that.
No, it takes more like 5 seconds.
Okay. I know in the early days of Git it was really really bad with mono repos. And this is why there were a lot of competitors like that came out around like very shortly after Git. But Git got better at that over time, it seems. Yeah.
And we have faster processors now.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I remember I think it was actually around like I think yeah, Mercurial. Facebook they internally use Mercurial because back when they were starting up, Git was unusable for mono repos, and the solution that was being suggested at the time is just don't. Just break it up into smaller repos. Like, no, we're not going to do that. So they just went to something else instead because it worked better.
Yeah.
But I guess as the Linux kernel's gotten bigger as well, they kind of had to address those problems because,
It's a forced problem.
Yeah. So, I think we've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover. Is there anything about Nix that you wanted to bring up still?
Kind of.
Mm.
Well, so I know you have talked about the System 76 Thelio Astra, right?
Failure.
The ARM desktop that
Yes, yes.
System 76 built. Yes. So one of the things with Nix is when you rebuild the world, rebuilding everything, you need a good processor
Mhm.
because you're rebuilding everything. And that sucks when you have like 4 cores.
Right.
Even 10 cores isn't that great sometimes.
Mhm.
Well, this is where something like AMD EPYC
Mhm. Mhm.
or Ampere is very useful
Mhm. Mhm.
because those systems have like 64, 80, 92, 128 cores. So it's like you have exponentially more compute.
Mhm.
And so Nix is great with that because you have two ways of being able to manage your job or like your builds. You
Mhm.
have the cores flag and you have the jobs flag.
Mhm.
And the cores dictates how many cores that make job is going to run inside of a derivation.
Mhm.
And then the job tells you how many Nix derivations to build at once.
Mhm.
And with Ampere, you can just build a lot on a single system.
Mhm.
It's just exactly how we do our CI. We actually have a few Ampere systems that we just plug in to our CI server and then
Mhm.
build. And fun fact, I have an Ampere desktop in its own case
Hey.
as my desktop.
Oh, wow.
The problem is I'm on AMD GPU,
Uh-huh.
and one thing AMD is known for is not supporting ARM. And you've also covered this desktop environment. I run it. Guess what desktop environment I run?
Um,
Very popular. Similar vein to Ampere.
wait, wait, oh, like
It's
Cosmic?
an alpha.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Cosmic.
run
Right,
Cosmic.
right, right.
Yeah, but so I run Cosmic on Ampere,
Uh-huh.
and because I have an AMD GPU, it doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
So I have to debug a graphics card to get a Rust built desktop environment to work.
How's that going?
Um, very little progress because I have no time.
Right. Fair. So what do you use instead of
So
Cosmic so you have a desktop?
I use my laptop.
Fair.
That is that's so the way I do things that I've been doing them since I've had Ampere is,
Mhm.
and that I've been on Cosmic. I just run Cosmic on an Apple M1 Pro. I then SSH in my desktop, and then I do things like that.
I guess, look, just pretend like your intention is to run it as a headless system and you'll be fine.
Well, the thinking is, if it's a desktop,
Mhm.
I can do many jobs at once and be able to do multiple things at once while my computer is doing things at multiple, just a lot of work at once.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
And then hopefully gaming, if games work and I figure out a way to run box 64 on Ampere. But the problem is I do this little thing. You may not be aware of it. It's called page size.
Mhm.
The
Ah.
memory is allocated with paging, and Apple Silicon uses a 16K page size. On Ampere, I have adjusted to 64K because higher page size, less many pages you have to allocate for a single large allocation, more performance.
Mhm.
The problem is when you come to emulation.
Mhm.
Emulation you expect a 4K page size, which doesn't map into 16K or 64K.
Mhm.
That means no games. And you know how you fix that on Asahi
How do you fix
or
that?
any system? You run a VM using something called MoveVM,
Mhm.
which runs six, it runs a 4K page size ARM VM on top of your 16 or 64K page size system
Okay.
that you're running. and it passes your graphics through.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, it's built for not NixOS. And because Asahi requires a special graphics driver that is their fork of Mesa,
Mm-hmm.
I can't test it. Unless I fix the graphics card to work with Cosmic on my Ampere desktop. And then I finally could get MovieM to work,
Mm-hmm.
which then I'll be able to finally get Boxy 4 to work, which then finally means I can get Steam.
It's a lot of extra work just to get video games to work.
And the only reason why I want to do this is
Mm-hmm.
because I want to game on Ampere and ARM.
That would be cool. Don't get me wrong. That would be really cool.
The only thing that runs right now is Minecraft, because that's Java.
Right, and yeah. Java
Java
runs.
runs on 6 billion
So
devices.
yeah, I was gonna say, what's the numbers? Is it 6 billion? I don't know what, like, sorry, this is random side tangent. Is it 3 billion? I don't even know. I don't know what the number's supposed to be. It's
From
not like,
as far as I remember, it's always been that little tagline when you install Java. It's runs on 6 billion devices or whatever.
who knows how they count it? Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter. Don't think about it.
It's Oracle. They pulled all their just their 6 vendors and customers.
So, hopefully you get that working. That will be good.
Hopefully, because then that will mean other people could run Steam on ARM
That
on
are not Ampere systems.
Asahi. Yeah.
On more sensible ARM chips that people might actually have. I hope that goes well. Was there anything else you want to mention, or can we just start signing off there?
I could say one quick thing.
Okay.
I am trying to get Clang to run inside UEFI because you could build your Linux system from your firmware.
Why? Why?
Because the joke is that UEFI is already its own operating system with how much it implements. Did you know UEFI has user accounts and
No,
multi-threading?
that makes sense. Have you started this project? Is it progressing?
I am waiting for some Googlers to
Mhm.
make some approvals from them.
Mhm.
And the thing with Googlers is they're also busy.
That's fair. Yeah, that makes sense.
But hey, at least the Fuchsia people also want this. So it's like I if they want it and I want it, it'll happen.
Hmm.
So maybe in 5 years you could build your Linux system from your firmware.
So stupid. That's so stupid. I love it.
But more performance.
I guess.
You don't have the overhead of an operating system. You only have your firmware then.
Hmm. That's cool. I do like that. That's really cool. Um. Well, that's a high note to end on, I guess. Yeah. Where can people find you if you want to mention your stuff, or if you want to get involved in Nix? Where should they go to?
Uh, I would say the NixOS Matrix. There is nix.dev. There is.
Is all of that stuff linked on the NixOS website?
I think it's under nixos.org/learn.
Okay. Um.
And then people can find me on Twitter at Ross Computer Guy. I am also under that same handle on GitHub and practically anywhere. If it's not the computer guy and you see a profile picture that looks like me, then it'll be Ross Computer Guy.
Mhm. Sweet.
So I'm usually everywhere, like Blue Sky, Mastodon, Reddit. My Reddit account's actually a different username. It's u/spaceboyross, but that's because I made that account like 10 years ago, and you can't change names on Reddit.
Really?
Yeah, once you make a username, it's locked.
Huh.
You cannot change usernames. Yeah.
That's dumb. Honestly, I'm surprised they don't charge for that. Considering Reddit, I'm surprised. Honestly, the fact
Or
that
you use your.
Hmm?
Or use the what is it, the coins or the gold?
Well, the fact they don't charge, I have a feeling there's something really wrong with their infrastructure where they can't change it. Anyway, nothing else you wanted to mention? That's pretty much all the stuff you want to direct people to?
Yeah. Also.
Yes, that I didn't want to mention it the entire time just because it's gonna bother people. Yes, there is a duck in the background.
Yeah, the duck VTuber.
Anyway, my channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. I've got the gaming channel, Brody on Games. I may have finished Strangers of Paradise by the time this goes out. May not, I don't know, we'll see. I'll also be playing Portal 2, which is probably going to be funny because I've never played it before. Yeah, I've actually never played.
Oh, I have.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, I've done the Portal 2 co-op. I've never actually played the single player.
I've played the single player, but never played the co-op.
That's probably the more normal way to handle it. I've got the React channel, that is Brody Robertson Reacts. I upload clips there from the streamers, so check those out if you want to. If you want to see the video version of this, you're hearing the audio version, go to YouTube at Tech Over Tea. The audio version is available on basically every podcast platform. There is an RSS feed on Spotify. We do have video as well. If you're one of those people who like Spotify video for some reason, yeah, I'll give you the final word. What do you want to say? How do you want to sign us off?
My cat will say bye.
Aw, I should have mentioned that earlier.
She'll hear the entire time.